Karen stormed across the yard, shouting at me and pointing at my dog. She claimed he was dangerous and didn't belong here. Within minutes, the HOA board gathered, laughing at my expense. But none of them knew the truth that would shut them up instantly. The sun had barely begun to dip when I heard the sharp click of heels against the sidewalk. I was standing in my own front yard, leash in hand, while Max, my German shepherd, sat calmly by my side. He wasn't barking, he wasn't lunging. He was doing what he always did, observing quietly, his steady eyes locked on the quiet suburban street. But the peace didn't last. "Excuse me," a shrill voice cut through the air. My stomach tightened even before I turned. Everyone in the neighborhood knew that voice. Karen, the self-appointed queen of the homeowners association, was storming straight toward me, arms crossed tight against her chest, face pinched with disgust. I gave a polite nod. "Evening." Her eyes didn't leave Max, that dog. "He's not supposed to be here." I blinked. "He's on my property." "That doesn't matter," she snapped, glancing around as though she wanted witnesses. "This is a family community. We can't have dangerous animals running around, scaring children. German shepherds are attack dogs. You should know better." I felt Max lean against my leg ever so slightly, reading my tension like he always did. He didn't move, didn't growl, just sat there, the very picture of calm discipline. "He's not dangerous," I said evenly. Karen scoffed, raising her voice now. "Oh please. Don't play innocent. Everyone knows those dogs turn on their owners eventually. What happens when he bites someone's kid?" Her words carried, and soon enough, heads began to peek out from behind curtains. A couple across the street stepped onto their porch. An older neighbor paused his evening walk to watch. Just like that, the audience Karen wanted was forming. And she knew it. "See," she said, sweeping her hand toward the gathering neighbors. "People are already concerned. You're putting everyone at risk. You think you're above the rules?" My jaw tightened. This wasn't the first time she'd singled me out. Since the day I moved in, she'd complained about the color of my shutters, the height of my grass, even the way I parked in my own driveway. But tonight, she'd chosen Max as her target, and that was something I couldn't let slide. "Karen," I said, keeping my voice calm, "he's a trained dog. He's never hurt anyone." Her lips curled into a mocking smile. "Trained? Trained for what, exactly?" "Intimidation." She turned to the gathering crowd, her voice dripping with false concern. "What kind of neighbor brings an attack dog into a peaceful neighborhood? Do you feel safe with that animal around your children?" A murmur ran through the crowd. Some avoided my eyes. Others whispered behind their hands. It didn't matter that Max hadn't moved an inch. Karen's performance was convincing, and her confidence gave her power. I clenched the leash tighter. "You're exaggerating." "No, I'm protecting this community," she barked. "And if you think you can just waltz in here with that beast, you've got another thing coming. This is against HOA rules, and I'll make sure you pay the price." The word rules was her favorite weapon. The HOA bylaws were thick with vague wording, the kind she twisted to suit her own agenda. I wanted to argue back, but before I could, another voice rang out. It was Mr. Daniels from 2 doors down, a man who usually kept to himself. "Is the dog really that dangerous?" he asked hesitantly. Karen turned on him like a hawk. "Of course. Look at it. It's huge, it's unpredictable, and it doesn't belong here. Don't let him fool you with excuses. He's breaking the rules, plain and simple." I could feel my chest tighten. The murmurs grew louder, and the weight of their eyes pressed heavy against me. I wanted to shout, to tell them they didn't know the first thing about Max. That he wasn't just a dog, he was family. He'd been by my side through things they couldn't even imagine. But before I could speak, Karen took another step closer, pointing her finger just inches from my face. "I'll have the HOA board deal with you personally. And if you don't comply," she let the threat hang in the air, then added with a venomous smile, "I'll call the police." Max shifted slightly, his ears flicking back as if sensing the hostility. But he remained still, the leash slack in my hand. "You do that," I said quietly. "Oh, I will." She spun toward the crowd again, her voice now loud enough for every window on the street to hear. "We don't tolerate dangerous animals here. I'll make sure the authorities handle this properly. And when they do, you'll wish you had listened." Her words echoed through the cul-de-sac, a mix of accusation and triumph. The neighbors stood frozen, torn between curiosity and fear. Karen smirked, already dialing her phone as she strutted toward the curb. The air was heavy with tension. My pulse hammered in my ears. Max pressed his body against my leg again, steadying me in the way only he could. And as Karen lifted her phone to her ear, ready to drag me into a battle I hadn't asked for, I knew this was only the beginning. The phone rang once, twice, and Karen gave me a sly smile. Let's see what the cops think about your little monster. Karen's voice rose sharp and triumphant as she pressed the phone against her ear. The street was still, every neighbor leaning in to catch every word. Yes, officer, she said dramatically, pacing in front of my lawn like an actress on stage. There's a dangerous dog here. A huge German shepherd. He's aggressive, unlicensed, and frightening the community. Yes, right now. We need immediate assistance. She turned her head toward me, making sure I heard each carefully chosen word. Max sat quietly beside me, tail curled against the grass, ears alert but calm. The contrast between her words and his behavior was almost laughable, but nobody in the crowd was laughing. Karen wasn't finished. Yes, he's threatening me. I feel unsafe. She even clutched her chest for effect, as if my dog's stillness was somehow an attack. I could feel my blood heating in my veins. That's a lie, I said firmly, but she shushed me with a wag of her finger, eyes wide with fake outrage. Threatening me right now, she repeated into the phone. Please hurry. This is a matter of public safety. When she finally hung up, the whispers began. Mrs. Jenkins, who lived across the street, hugged her granddaughter a little tighter and whispered, I told you that dog gave me chills. Another man muttered, we moved here to avoid problems like this. The crowd wasn't angry yet, but they were uneasy. Karen's words planted seeds of fear, and fear spreads fast. Karen, sensing her momentum, stepped closer. This isn't just about you, she said, her voice dripping with righteousness. It's about everyone here. Do you know how many children walk this street every morning to get to school? Do you think their parents want to risk some unpredictable animal charging at them? Max isn't unpredictable, I shot back. He's trained. He's calmer than half the people on this street. Her eyes narrowed, the corners of her lips twitching into a smirk. Trained? Please. Anyone can say that. What proof do you have? Do you think words are enough when lives are on the line? She pivoted to the crowd again, her hands raised in mock despair. Neighbors, do you want your kids in danger? Do you want your property values ruined by someone breaking the rules? A low murmur of agreement rippled through the gathering. Some nodded reluctantly, others kept silent. No one dared to defend me. I clenched my fist. You're twisting the truth, Karen. He hasn't done a thing to anyone. He's sitting right here, calm as can be. She laughed, but it wasn't the kind of laugh that carried humor. It was sharp, hollow, designed to belittle. Oh yes, he looks calm now. But what about tomorrow? Next week? Dogs like that snap without warning. You're selfish for keeping him here. My chest burned. I wanted to shout the truth, that Max wasn't just any dog. That he'd been through more discipline and training than anyone could imagine. But I held my tongue. The timing had to be right. Karen took another step closer, her eyes gleaming with superiority. Do you even have him registered? Where's the paperwork? The HOA has strict rules. All pets must be approved by the board, and I don't recall seeing any forms for this beast. That's not true, I countered, my voice hard. Service animals are exempt from. Oh, please, she cut me off, rolling her eyes. Service animal? That's the oldest trick in the book. Everyone says that now just to get special treatment. Show us the papers if you really have them. Show us right here in front of everyone. The neighbors leaned closer, hungry for proof. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. I held her stare. Not tonight. You don't get to demand things on your schedule. She gasped, clasping her hands together as though she'd just uncovered some scandal. You see? He won't show us because he doesn't have them. He's hiding the truth. He knows that dog doesn't belong here. The crowd muttered louder now, the unease hardening into suspicion. Karen had them exactly where she wanted them. Then, with a voice loud enough to echo against the houses, she declared, this isn't just about rules anymore. This is about safety. He's endangering this community. And if the HOA has to take legal action, we will. My grip tightened around Max's leash. I could feel the dog's steady presence grounding me, reminding me not to lose control. You're lying to them, I said evenly, though my voice carried steel. Max has never hurt anyone. He never will. Karen tilted her head, smiling sweetly, like a cat toying with a cornered mouse. Then prove it. But you can't, can you? The crowd shifted uncomfortably. People wanted resolution, answers, certainty. Karen had fanned the flames, and now they were waiting for me to choke on the smoke. But before I could respond, the distant wail of a siren cut through the evening air. Heads turned, and Karen's face lit up with satisfaction. Ah, she said smugly. Finally. The law will handle this since you refuse to. The neighbors murmured, shuffling closer to the curb as red and blue lights began to dance against the houses. My heart pounded in my chest. This was spiraling faster than I'd expected. And Karen wasn't done. She leaned in one last time, her voice low but dripping with venom. You should have listened when I told you to get rid of that mutt. Now you're about to regret it. The police cruiser pulled into the cul-de-sac, headlights washing over the crowd. The officer stepped out slowly, scanning the scene. Karen waved frantically, shouting, "Over here, officer. He's the one with the dangerous animal." And every pair of eyes turned to me. The flashing lights painted the street in streaks of red and blue, washing over the neat lawns and manicured hedges like warning signals. Neighbors leaned further out of their doorways, whispers cutting through the warm evening air. Some clutched coffee mugs, others held their kids close, all of them waiting to see what would happen next. The cruiser rolled to a stop at the edge of the cul-de-sac. The door opened and out stepped a uniformed officer. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and moved with calm authority. His eyes swept the scene, narrowing slightly as he took in the cluster of neighbors, Karen's frantic waving, and then finally me, standing quietly with Max seated by my side. Karen wasted no time. She rushed toward the officer, hand in the air as if she were flagging down an ambulance. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," she cried. "That man is keeping a dangerous, unlicensed animal in this neighborhood. The dog's aggressive, unpredictable, and he's frightening everyone." The officer raised a hand to calm her down. "Ma'am, slow down. Let me understand the situation." But Karen wasn't about to slow down. She gestured wildly at Max. "Look at it. Look at the size of that beast. He shouldn't even be allowed in a family community. He's already threatened me. We're all afraid for our safety. Something has to be done." The crowd murmured in agreement, some nodding, others just looking uncomfortable. The officer turned his gaze toward me. "Sir, can you tell me what's going on here?" I met his eyes steadily. "Officer, my dog hasn't threatened anyone. He's calm, trained, and on my property. Karen here is making accusations that aren't true." Karen let out a sharp laugh. "Oh, he's going to play innocent now. Of course he is. That's what people like him do. Pretend it's all fine until it's too late." "Ma'am," the officer said firmly, "I'll hear from both of you. One at a time." Karen huffed but folded her arms, lips pressed into a thin line. The officer stepped closer to me and Max. He looked at the dog first. Max sat tall, ears perked, eyes steady. His tail thumped once against the grass as the officer approached, not in excitement but in acknowledgement. "Has the dog shown aggression tonight?" the officer asked, directing the question to Karen and the onlookers. Karen jumped in immediately. "Of course he has." He growled at me, lunged at me. I barely escaped being bitten. A few neighbors glanced at each other. They hadn't seen Max lunge. They hadn't even heard him growl. But Karen's certainty made them hesitate to speak. The officer raised an eyebrow. He studied Max again, then looked back at me. "Do you have any papers for the dog? Proof of registration, vaccination, anything like that?" "I do," I said, nodding. "But before I show you, I want to be clear. He hasn't threatened anyone. You can see it yourself. He's calm. He's trained." The officer gave a short nod. "I can see he's calm now, yes. But for the record, I'll need to review documentation." Karen smirked, her eyes glittering with triumph. She turned to the crowd, whispering loudly enough for all to hear. "See? He doesn't have it on him. He's stalling. That's what guilty people do." The neighbors stirred again, some muttering their agreement. "Karen," I said evenly, "you're lying and you know it. Max hasn't moved a muscle since you got here. Everyone can see that." She gasped dramatically. "Oh, so now I'm lying? You're going to insult me in front of the officer? Fine. Let's hear what the law has to say. Go ahead, officer. Ask him where his papers are. Let's expose the truth right now." The officer held up a hand again, his tone level but firm. "Enough. I'm not here to take sides. I'm here to establish facts." He turned back to me. "Sir, do you have paperwork available at your residence?" "I do," I replied. "It's inside. I can get it if needed." "Good. We'll get to that." He glanced at Karen. "And ma'am, until I see evidence, I need you to calm down. Making exaggerated claims won't help." Karen flushed, her jaw tightening. "Exaggerated? Officer, you don't understand. That dog." "I'll be the judge of what I understand," the officer cut her off, his tone harder now. The crowd grew restless. Some whispered about how calm Max seemed, others exchanged doubtful looks at Karen's performance. A few even began to drift closer, curiosity outweighing fear. I crouched slightly, resting a hand on Max's back. His body was solid, steady, unshaken. He glanced up at me briefly as if to remind me he was still there, still holding the line. The officer took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Tell me honestly, sir. Is there anything I should know about this dog? Any history of aggression? Any complaints?" I shook my head. "None. He's never hurt anyone. He's more disciplined than most people I know." The officer studied me for a moment, then looked at Max again. Something in his eyes softened, just a flicker but enough for me to notice. Karen, however, wasn't done. She pointed a trembling finger at me. "He's lying, officer. That dog doesn't belong here. He's dangerous, and if you don't remove him, someone's going to get hurt. We all know it." The officer straightened, closing his notepad. His expression was unreadable. He looked at Karen, then at me. "All right," he said at last. "I'll need to see proof before I make any decision. Sir, I'll ask you to go retrieve your documents. Ma'am, you and the rest of the HOA board, stay right here. We'll sort this out properly." Karen's smirk returned. She folded her arms, tilting her head toward me. "Oh, this should be good. Go ahead. Show us your little papers. We'll see just how real they are." The officer's gaze locked on mine. "Sir, you have those documents, right?" I met his eyes, steady and calm. "Yes, I do. And once you see them, this entire circus will fall apart." The officer gave a curt nod. "Then go get them. I'll wait." Behind me, Max stood as if ready to follow, but I whispered for him to stay. The crowd leaned in, Karen's smile stretching wider by the second. She thought she'd won. But deep down, I knew her victory was about to collapse. I turned toward my house, ready to grab the folder from my office where I kept Max's records neatly filed. But I only made it a few steps before the HOA board closed ranks in front of me, like a wall of self-righteousness. Karen stood at the center, chin lifted high, arms folded with smug confidence. To her left, Mr. Collins, the HOA treasurer, a balding man with glasses perched on the tip of his nose, stepped forward, pointing a finger at me. "Hold it right there," he said, his voice dripping with authority he didn't really have. "Before you try pulling out some conveniently printed paperwork, let's get one thing straight. This isn't just about documents. It's about community trust. And frankly, you've lost it." The murmurs from the crowd grew louder. Collins' words carried weight not because they were true, but because he spoke like a man who believed them. Karen seized the moment. "Exactly," she added, her voice shrill. "Paperwork can be forged. Anybody can slap together a certificate on their computer. What matters is what we've seen tonight, and what we've seen is a dangerous animal threatening our peace." I clenched my jaw, forcing my voice to stay calm. "You haven't seen a thing. Max hasn't moved from this spot. He hasn't barked, he hasn't lunged. He's been calm the entire time." "Oh, please," Karen scoffed. "He's calm now because you're holding him back. But what about tomorrow? Or next week? What about when some child drops their ball into your yard and he's the first thing they see?" The board members nodded like disciples in church. Collins adjusted his glasses and said, "The bylaws are clear. Any animal deemed a threat by the HOA can be removed. And we're deeming him a threat." "That's not how it works," I said sharply. "You can't just declare something true because you want it to be." Karen smirked. "Watch us." The officer stepped in at that point, his voice firm. "Enough. I'll handle this. Let the man get his documents." But Karen wasn't finished. She leaned toward the officer, lowering her voice in faux sincerity. "Officer, you need to understand. This isn't just about one dog. It's about what happens when people ignore the rules. If you let him get away with this, what's next? Pit bulls roaming around? Dangerous animals everywhere? We're just trying to protect the neighborhood." The officer scribbled in his notepad, giving no hint of where he stood. Karen mistook his silence for agreement. Collins chimed in again, his tone grave. "And let's not forget liability. If this dog bites someone, who pays? The HOA gets sued. Homeowners lose property value. It's not just his problem. It's all of ours." The neighbors muttered again, fear spreading like wildfire. I could see the uncertainty in their eyes. It didn't matter that Max was sitting calmly, his head tilted slightly as if confused by the uproar. Words, loud, repeated, insistent words, carried more power than the quiet truth. My fists curled tight, but I forced myself to stay steady. This was what they wanted, to make me snap, to prove their point. I raised my voice enough for everyone to hear. "Max isn't a threat. He's registered, he's trained, and he's protected under federal law. You can try to twist the bylaws all you want, but you can't rewrite the truth. Karen let out a laugh, a sharp, mocking sound. Federal law? Really? That's your defense? Oh, we'll see about that. Why don't you go ahead and show us this so-called proof? Unless, of course, you're bluffing. I met her eyes. I'm not bluffing. Her smile faltered for a split second, but she recovered quickly, turning back to the officer. You see? He's stalling again. Probably doesn't have anything to show. Probably bought that dog off Craigslist and thought no one would notice. Well, we noticed. The officer closed his notepad and cleared his throat. Ma'am, unless you have actual evidence, you'll let him speak for himself. He says he has documentation. I'm going to see it. Karen's face flushed, but Collins stepped in smoothly. Officer, with all due respect, do you really think a piece of paper proves anything? Dogs can be trained to attack just as easily as they can be trained to sit still. What happens when this one turns violent? The officer frowned. That's speculation. Speculation that could save lives, Karen shot back, her voice trembling with forced urgency. The crowd shifted again, torn between reason and fear. I could feel every eye on me weighing, judging. I exhaled slowly, then turned toward my front door. Fine, I said. You want proof? You'll get it. Karen's smirk returned, sharp as glass. She crossed her arms, tilting her head with exaggerated satisfaction. Oh, I can't wait to see this. As I walked toward the door, Max padded silently at my side, his steady presence a comfort in the sea of hostility. My hand brushed his head once, a silent promise. Behind me, Karen's voice carried like nails on a chalkboard. Go ahead, officer. Let's watch him dig through his little drawer of fake papers. I bet he's been planning this excuse for weeks. The neighbors laughed nervously, some siding with her, others just caught up in the tension. The officer, however, didn't laugh. His gaze stayed on me, unreadable, but I caught something there, curiosity. Maybe even suspicion that the truth wasn't what Karen wanted it to be. Still, the pressure was suffocating. I could feel Karen's eyes burning into my back as I reached my front door. The crowd's whispers rose and fell like waves, crashing against my determination. Max looked up at me, steady as stone. His eyes said what I couldn't: we've faced worse. Don't let them break you now. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, the weight of the neighborhood's judgment pressing against my shoulders. Karen's voice rang out one last time as the door closed behind me. Mark my words, he's got nothing. When he comes back out here, the truth will expose him. But she had no idea the truth I was about to reveal would change everything. The moment the door clicked shut behind me, the noise from outside dulled to a muffled hum. Karen's shrill voice was still carrying through the walls, but in here it was quiet, calm. Almost too calm. Max followed me just inside the doorway before stopping on command. His ears twitched toward the sound of the crowd, but his body stayed still, obedient as ever. I crouched by the small cabinet in the hallway, pulling open the drawer where I kept important files. My hands trembled slightly, not because I doubted the truth, but because I knew how determined Karen was to twist it. I found the folder easily, a thick manila envelope marked with Max's name in bold letters. Inside were copies of his registration, vaccination records, and more. But tucked neatly in the back was something far more powerful, something Karen had no idea was coming. I straightened, folder in hand, and glanced at Max. He looked up at me with those steady brown eyes, tail thumping once against the floor as if to say, "You've got this." When I opened the door again, the noise surged back. Karen was in full performance mode, arms flailing as she recounted her version of events to anyone who would listen. And then he told me I was lying. Me. In front of everyone. That's when I knew he had something to hide. The neighbors chuckled awkwardly, caught between disbelief and the thrill of gossip. The officer stood a few feet away, arms crossed now, his expression cool but attentive. As soon as the crowd spotted the folder in my hand, a wave of murmurs rippled through them. Karen's eyes zeroed in on it like a hawk spotting prey. Her smirk widened. "Well, well," she said loudly, clapping her hands once in mock applause. "Look who decided to play along. Let's see what kind of Photoshop magic you've cooked up in there." I ignored her jab and walked calmly to the center of the lawn, Max padding beside me. The officer stepped forward, holding out his hand. "All right, let's take a look," he said evenly. But before I could hand over the documents, Karen darted closer, eyes glittering. "No, no, no. Show us first. The whole neighborhood deserves to see the truth." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, this is official business. Step back." Karen's smirk faltered for a moment, but she recovered, folding her arms. "Fine. But we all know he's bluffing. Let him embarrass himself." I handed the folder to the officer. He flipped it open and began scanning the pages one by one. His brow furrowed, his lips pressing into a thin line as his eyes moved across the documents. The crowd leaned forward, straining to catch a glimpse of his expression. Karen, impatient as ever, snapped, "Well? What does it say? Is it real? Or is it the fake nonsense I said it would be?" The officer closed the folder slowly, tucking the papers under his arm. "The vaccinations and registration appear legitimate." The crowd buzzed. A few eyebrows rose. A few murmurs of surprise floated through the air. Karen's face flushed, but she didn't back down. "Appear legitimate?" she repeated, her voice rising. "Appear? That's not good enough. People forge papers all the time. How do we know he didn't print those out from some shady website? You can't just take his word for it." Collins stepped forward to back her up. "Exactly. If you let this slide, officer, you're setting a dangerous precedent. Anyone could claim their dog is safe. What happens when it isn't?" The officer's jaw tightened. He was clearly growing tired of their constant interruptions, but he didn't speak yet. I stepped forward, my voice steady but sharp. "You want more than paperwork? Fine. You'll get more. But understand this, once I show you, there's no going back." Karen laughed, though there was a hint of nervousness in it this time. "Oh, please. Don't act like you're holding some kind of trump card. You've got nothing." I crouched beside Max, sliding my hand beneath the collar of his vest. My fingers brushed against the hidden clasp, and I pulled free the small leather case that was clipped securely underneath. Karen leaned forward, eyes narrowing, trying to see. "What's that?" she demanded. I rose slowly, the leather case in my hand. The officer's eyes flicked to it, his expression shifting ever so slightly. "This," I said, my voice carrying across the crowd, "is something no amount of forged paperwork can replicate." Karen's smirk wavered. "What are you talking about?" I held the case up but didn't open it yet. "Max isn't just any dog. He's not a pet you can dismiss, not some stray off the street. He's trained, certified, and recognized by law. And in about 30 seconds, you're going to understand exactly why everything you've said tonight is about to blow up in your face." The neighbors stirred, some gasping softly, others whispering to each other. The officer's eyes stayed locked on the case in my hand, his posture straightening. Karen took a step back, then quickly regained her bravado. "You're bluffing. You're trying to scare us into silence. Show us what's in there, or admit you've been lying all along." I snapped the case open. The leather creaked softly, and inside, gleaming under the porch light, was something unmistakable, but I didn't hold it up yet. Gasps rippled through the closest neighbors as they caught a glimpse. Karen squinted, her expression twisting from smugness to confusion. What is that?" she asked, her voice suddenly less certain. I closed the case with a click and slid it back into Max's vest. "You'll see soon enough," I said evenly. "But for now, let's make one thing clear. Max is here legally, he's trained, and he's not going anywhere." The officer's eyes narrowed, clearly recognizing more than he was letting on. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but Karen cut in quickly, her voice rising in desperation. "He's hiding something. Did you see that? He didn't even show us properly. Whatever that was, it proves nothing. Don't let him fool you, officer. He's trying to play games." The crowd buzzed louder, torn between curiosity and suspicion. Neighbors leaned in closer, eyes darting between Karen's frantic gestures and the calm stillness of Max at my side. I looked at Karen, my voice low but carrying. "You've made this personal. You've lied, twisted, and mocked. But you're about to learn that not every truth can be shouted down. Some truths carry more weight than all the noise in the world." The officer cleared his throat, his eyes sharp. "Sir," he said carefully, "I think it's time you explain exactly what you just showed me." The crowd fell silent. Karen froze, her eyes wide. And for the first time that evening, I saw something flicker across her face that hadn't been there before: doubt. The silence that hung over the cul-de-sac was heavier than any words Karen had thrown at me all evening. The crowd that had been buzzing with whispers just moments earlier was now quiet, their eyes darting between me, Max, and the officer. The leather case still rested in my hand. I could feel Karen's stare burning into me, her bravado fighting to hold against the creeping edges of doubt. She forced a laugh too high-pitched to sound genuine. "Come on," she said, waving a hand. "Enough with the theatrics. Whatever little trick you've got in there doesn't mean anything. Stop stalling and show us already." The officer stepped forward, his voice calm but carrying authority. "Sir, open it. Let everyone see." I nodded once. With deliberate slowness, I unclasped the case again, letting it fall open in my hand. The porch light caught on the polished surface inside, gleaming gold and blue. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A murmur of recognition swept over the closer neighbors who craned their necks to see. Karen froze mid-smirk, her mouth hanging open just slightly. The officer leaned in, his eyes locking onto the badge. His voice, steady all evening, carried a note of respect now. "That's official." Karen blinked rapidly, her confidence faltering. What is it? Some toy you bought online? They sell fake badges on the internet all the time. It doesn't prove anything. But her voice trembled at the edges. I turned the badge outward so the crowd could see more clearly. "This," I said, my voice steady and strong, "is Max's service dog badge. Issued and registered through official channels. He's recognized under federal law as a working service animal. Every single piece of paperwork backs this up. And no amount of your shouting can change that." The neighbors stirred again, but this time it wasn't the uneasy muttering Karen had fueled earlier. It was surprise. Curiosity. A few even nodded slowly as though things were beginning to click into place. Karen shook her head violently, her hair whipping over her shoulder. No, this is ridiculous. You expect us to believe that Mutt is some kind of hero dog? Please. He's just another oversized menace. A badge doesn't change what he is." The officer turned his gaze sharply to her, his tone suddenly firmer than before. "Ma'am, that badge is real. I've seen enough of them in my line of work to know the difference. And service animals are protected under federal law. HOA rules do not override that." Karen's face went pale. Collins, the treasurer, cleared his throat, fumbling for words. "Well, that doesn't mean he belongs here. Service animal or not, there are community standards. And we, as the HOA board, have a duty." The officer cut him off. "Your duty doesn't extend to discriminating against a legally recognized service dog. If you continue down this road, you're looking at harassment. Maybe even legal consequences." A hush fell over the crowd. The shift was happening. I could feel it. Max sat calmly at my side, his posture dignified, as though he understood that this was his moment too. His eyes swept the crowd, steady and alert, not aggressive but unflinching. I crouched beside him, resting my hand on his back. Max isn't here to intimidate anyone. He's here because I need him. And because he's earned the right to be here more than any of us. Karen's eyes darted from the officer to the neighbors, searching desperately for support. "Don't listen to him," she cried. "He's spinning a story. Service dog or not, he shouldn't be here. He's dangerous. He'll hurt someone eventually, you'll see." But her words no longer landed with the same force. The neighbors weren't nodding anymore. They were watching her, their expressions shifting from sympathy to discomfort. A few even whispered not about Max but about her. The officer flipped the badge over in his hand, checking the number engraved into the metal. He nodded to himself, satisfied. "This checks out. No question about it. Max is a registered service dog." He handed the badge back to me with a short nod of respect. Karen's face twisted with frustration. She pointed at me, her voice cracking now. "This isn't fair. You can't just bring some police dog into a neighborhood like this and expect us to." I stood, cutting her off with a voice sharper than I'd used all night. "That's exactly what you're going to do. Because the law says so. And because Max has earned more respect than your entire board combined." The neighbors gasped softly, some even chuckling under their breath. Karen's mouth opened and closed, but no words came. For once she was speechless. The officer looked directly at her. "Ma'am, I suggest you step back and think carefully about your next words. You've made serious accusations tonight, and they've been disproven. If you continue this behavior, I'll have no choice but to document it as harassment." Karen's shoulders slumped, her confidence leaking out of her like air from a punctured balloon. The tide had turned. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I slid the badge back into Max's vest, fastening it with deliberate care. Then I looked around at the crowd, meeting their eyes one by one. "You've all stood here tonight listening to lies. You watched as Karen tried to humiliate me and Max, twisting rules and spreading fear. But the truth is stronger than noise. And this," I patted Max's vest gently, "this is the truth." The neighbors shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes, others nodding quietly. The weight of realization was settling in. Karen opened her mouth again, but the officer silenced her with a raised hand. "Enough," he said firmly. "The badge is clear. The paperwork is in order. This dog is not only allowed here, he's protected by law. End of discussion." Karen's face burned crimson, her fists clenching at her sides. She looked like she wanted to scream, but no words came. The officer turned back to me, his expression curious now. "Sir, One thing I'd like to know, where exactly did Max serve before becoming your service dog? The question hung in the air like a spark over dry leaves. The neighbors leaned in, hungry for the answer. Karen froze, eyes wide, sensing another truth was about to unravel. And I knew it was time to reveal the part of Max's story that would silence them all. The officer's question seemed simple, but the weight behind it pressed on the entire crowd. Where did Max serve? He repeated, his voice calm but edged with curiosity. All eyes turned toward me. Even the neighbors who had been whispering in Karen's corner a few minutes ago now leaned forward, captivated. I drew in a slow breath, glancing down at Max. His ears twitched, his gaze steady on me as if he knew exactly what was about to happen. Max, I began, my voice carrying across the hushed cul-de-sac, isn't just a service dog. Before he came home with me he was part of the K-9 unit. He served with law enforcement for years, trained, disciplined, and deployed in situations most of us can't even imagine. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several neighbors straightened, eyes widening. The officer's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition lighting in his eyes. Karen let out a sharp, forced laugh. Oh please. You expect us to believe that Mutt was some kind of police officer? That's just another story you're making up to impress everyone. But her voice lacked conviction this time. I ignored her and continued. Max tracked missing children. He found evidence that solved cases. And he stood on the front lines during dangerous raids. He's been through more discipline, more training, and more service than most people could ever dream of. He's not just calm tonight because he's well behaved. He's calm because discipline is his nature. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. The crowd was silent now, listening. 2 years ago, I said softly, Max was injured in the line of duty. Not badly enough to end his life, but badly enough that he couldn't keep serving. His partner, the officer he'd worked with for years, begged to keep him, but Max needed a calmer environment. That's when he came to me, not as a pet, but as a companion, a guardian, and a lifeline. For a moment, the only sound was the faint hum of crickets in the grass. Even Karen didn't speak. The officer nodded slowly, his jaw tightening with something that looked like respect. I've worked alongside K9S, he said quietly. They're some of the most loyal partners we've ever had. If what you're saying is true, he trailed off, glancing at Max again, then this community owes him respect. A murmur of agreement ran through the neighbors. The same people who had looked uneasy earlier were now whispering in awe. I caught snippets, a police dog. That explains everything. No wonder he's so disciplined. Karen, however, refused to give in. She threw up her hands, her voice cracking under pressure. This is ridiculous. He doesn't have proof of that. Anyone can make up some sob story about a dog's past. Where's the evidence? Where's the real proof? I looked directly at her, my voice calm but cutting. The badge you just saw? It's tied to Max's service record. Every number on it links back to his training and deployment history. The officer here knows that. That's why he didn't laugh when he saw it. The officer confirmed it with a nod. She's right about one thing, people do lie. But that badge isn't fake. I can verify it myself if needed. Karen's face turned red, her words tangling in her throat. This is absurd. You're all being fooled by some shiny piece of metal. He's dangerous and you'll see that soon enough. But the neighbors weren't buying it anymore. Mrs. Jenkins, who had clutched her granddaughter so tightly earlier, now stepped forward cautiously. Her voice trembled, but it carried sincerity. If he really was a police dog, she hesitated, glancing at Max, then maybe I was wrong. He doesn't look dangerous. He looks loyal. The little girl peeked out from behind her grandmother's legs, eyes wide with curiosity. Grandma, can I pet him? The crowd chuckled softly, tension easing. Karen's face twisted with fury. No, she snapped. Don't let your children near that beast. Don't fall for this performance. But the damage was done. The tide had shifted. The crowd was no longer with her. I crouched beside Max again, my hand brushing his fur. He leaned into me slightly, steady and calm. I looked up at the neighbors, speaking clearly. You've been told lies tonight. But the truth is simple. Max has risked his life for strangers. He's protected people who didn't even know his name. And now he's here to protect me. Not from you, not from children playing in the street, but from the battles I fight every day that you don't see. The neighbors listened quietly, the weight of my words settling over them. Karen, desperate now, tried one last time. He's manipulating you. Can't you see? He's spinning a story to make himself look like a hero. None of this changes the fact that he's dangerous. The officer stepped forward, cutting her off firmly. Ma'am, enough. You've made your case. And it's been disproven. If you continue this behavior, I'll be filing a harassment report. Karen froze, her mouth snapping shut. The threat of real consequences silenced her faster than anything I could have said. The officer turned back to me. Sir, thank you for explaining. And thank you for what Max has done. K9s don't just serve, they save lives. And I can tell he's one of the good ones. A ripple of agreement spread through the neighbors. For the first time all night, the atmosphere shifted from hostility to respect. I nodded once, placing the badge securely back into Max's vest. Max isn't here to fight with neighbors. He's here to live out his days in peace. And I won't let anyone take that away from him. Karen, red-faced and trembling, took a step forward, her voice low and venomous. This isn't over. Badge or not, I'll find another way to make sure that dog is gone. The crowd gasped, shocked by her persistence. The officer's expression hardened. And I realized, the battle wasn't finished. Not yet. The cul-de-sac was no longer on Karen's side. You could see it in the shifting body language of the neighbors, the way folded arms began to loosen, the way eyes that had been wary now softened when they looked at Max. Even the little girl who'd asked to pet him was tugging gently at her grandmother's sleeve, her wide eyes full of curiosity, not fear. But Karen wasn't ready to surrender. She stepped forward red-faced, her voice cracking as she shouted, "Don't be fooled. He's spinning a story trying to make himself look noble. But at the end of the day that animal is still dangerous. One slip, one mistake and someone could get hurt. Do you want blood on your hands?" Her words fell flat. The neighbors didn't flinch this time. Instead they glanced at each other, some shaking their heads. Collins, the treasurer, cleared his throat nervously, clearly unsure which way to lean. "Karen does raise a point," he muttered. "We do have to consider liability." Karen seized on it instantly, her eyes flashing. "Exactly. Liability. If something happens, who pays? The HOA. Our property values will plummet, our community will be unsafe. We can't allow this man to make a mockery of the rules." But her voice had lost its earlier sharpness. It wasn't conviction anymore, it was desperation. I stayed calm, my hand resting gently on Max's back. Max has served this country. He's trained, registered, and recognized by federal law. Your HOA rules don't override that no matter how much you scream. You've twisted the truth all night, but the truth stands stronger. The officer nodded. That's right. Federal protections for service animals are clear. Any attempt to interfere is unlawful. Period. Karen turned on him, her voice shrill. So you're just going to take his side? You're supposed to protect us. You're supposed to keep the community safe. The officer's eyes hardened. Ma'am, I am protecting this community. And right now, the only threat I see is your behavior. The neighbors murmured, some chuckling quietly. Karen's face burned crimson. She turned back to the crowd, raising her arms like a preacher at a pulpit. Don't you see? He's manipulating all of you. If we don't stop this, who knows what comes next? More dangerous dogs? Chaos? We have to vote him out. The board has the power to do that and I say we use it. Her words echoed, but instead of rallying the neighbors, they created a stunned silence. People exchanged glances, their faces uncertain. A few looked disgusted. Mrs. Jenkins spoke up, her voice steady. Vote him out? For what? For having a service dog? That's harassment, Karen. And I won't stand for it. The little girl peeked around her grandmother again, whispering, "He looks like a good dog, Grandma." Karen spun on her, horrified. "Don't you dare. Don't let your child anywhere near that animal. You're putting her life at risk." The grandmother pulled her granddaughter closer, but this time not out of fear, out of indignation. "No, Karen. I've known you a long time and I've put up with your bullying. But tonight? You've gone too far." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's mouth fell open. For the first time, one of her most loyal allies had turned against her. Colin stepped back, clearly rattled. The other board members shifted uncomfortably, avoiding her gaze. I stepped forward, my voice firm. "You can shout all you want. But you can't rewrite the law and you can't erase Max's service. The more you push, the more you show this neighborhood who you really are." Karen's fists clenched. "You think this is over? You think some badge and a sob story about a dog makes you untouchable? We'll see about that. The board will vote. We'll strip you of your rights and then we'll see how long you and that animal last here." The officer shook his head. "No, you won't. Because the moment you do, you'll be in violation of federal protections. And if this harassment continues, I'll personally file a report." Do you really want that on record, Karen? The crowd murmured louder now, this time with nods of agreement. Karen's control was slipping through her fingers and she knew it. But she refused to back down. She pointed at me one last time, her voice trembling with rage. Mark my words. You may have fooled them tonight, but I'll find another way. That dog will not stay here. Not while I'm in charge. Her words echoed into the quiet night. The neighbors recoiled at her venom, their earlier fear replaced with disgust. The officer's expression hardened, his hand brushing against the notebook at his side as though ready to take down her threat in writing. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I simply looked her dead in the eye and said, check the bylaws before you threaten me again. You'll want to make sure you understand exactly what they say. Karen froze. Her mouth opened, then shut again. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in her eyes. The neighbors whispered louder, their curiosity piqued. Even Collins furrowed his brow, glancing nervously at Karen as though he wasn't sure what she'd gotten them into. Karen sputtered, What are you talking about? I didn't answer. I let the silence hang, let the suspense coil tight in the air. Then I smiled faintly. You'll see soon enough. The officer raised his brows, interested. The neighbors leaned in closer. And for the first time all night, Karen looked genuinely afraid of what might come next. The air in the cul-de-sac had shifted. Where Karen once stood tall, bolstered by murmurs and whispers, she now stood alone, her voice growing thinner, her arguments unraveling. The neighbors weren't nodding anymore. They weren't afraid anymore. They were watching her, and me, waiting for the next strike. Karen's eyes darted from face to face, desperate for support. When none came, she turned back to me, pointing a trembling finger. You think you're clever. You think you can twist this around with your little stories and shiny badges. But the board still has power. The bylaws say we can remove anyone who threatens the community, and we'll use them. Don't think you're safe. Her words rang out, but instead of inspiring fear, they landed with a dull thud. Collins shifted uneasily behind her, his face pale. Even the other board members looked uncertain. That was my moment. I stepped forward, Max padding silently at my side. I held my head high, my voice steady. You're right about one thing, Karen. The bylaws do give the HOA power. But only if you actually know what's written in them. Her eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I reached into the folder I still held. With deliberate care, I pulled out a thin, stapled packet, my personal copy of the HOA bylaws. I flipped it open, thumbing through the pages until I found the section I'd already highlighted. Page 24. Article 7, Section 4. I read it aloud, my voice carrying over the crowd. No regulation enacted by this association shall infringe upon the rights of residents as protected by state or federal law, including but not limited to protections afforded to individuals requiring service animals. Gasps rippled through the neighbors. Karen's face drained of color. I held the paper higher. Let me repeat that, service animals are explicitly protected in the bylaws. Your own rules confirm that you have no authority over Max. None. Every threat you've made tonight isn't just baseless. It's a violation of your own regulations. The officer nodded slowly, his lips curling into the faintest smirk. He's right. I've seen similar clauses before. It's standard language in most HOA charters. The neighbors stirred, whispering louder now. He's got them, it's written right there, so she lied? Karen shook her head violently, her words tumbling out in a rush. No, that's not what it means. That's taken out of context. He's twisting it, don't you see? But no one believed her. Collins shifted nervously, tugging at his collar. Karen, if that's really what it says, then maybe we can't. Shut up, Collins, she snapped, her voice cracking. Don't you dare turn on me now. But it was too late. The other board members looked away, avoiding her eyes. They knew the truth. I stepped closer, my voice calm but cutting. You've humiliated yourself tonight. You tried to twist the law, the rules, and the truth. But the truth is written right here in black and white. Max is staying. And the more you push, the more you expose yourself. Karen's breathing quickened. She looked around wildly, searching for backup. But the neighbors weren't with her anymore. They weren't whispering about Max. They were whispering about her. She lied to us, always pushing too far. Enough is enough. Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward, her voice sharp. Karen, you've embarrassed this community tonight. You owe him an apology. Karen gasped, her face twisting in disbelief. Apologize? To him? After everything? Never. The officer's voice cut through the tension like a blade. Then here's what's going to happen. I'm filing a report on tonight's incident. Any further harassment directed at this man or his service dog will result in legal consequences. Do I make myself clear? The crowd buzzed louder, some gasping, others nodding firmly. The weight of authority had landed squarely against Karen. She stumbled backward, her face red and trembling, her words weak now. This isn't fair. I was just trying to protect the community. I met her eyes, my voice steady but laced with finality. No, Karen. You were trying to control it. And tonight you lost. The neighbors murmured in agreement, some even clapping softly. For the first time all evening, the balance of power shifted completely. Karen's fists clenched at her sides. She looked like she wanted to scream, but no words came. Her authority, her smugness, her endless tirade, all of it had collapsed in the face of undeniable truth. Collins cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should adjourn this matter. The bylaws are clear. There's nothing more to discuss. The neighbors chuckled softly, shaking their heads. Karen's face contorted, but she could do nothing. Max sat calmly at my side, dignified, his presence commanding more respect than Karen's entire performance had earned her all night. The officer glanced back at me, his eyes narrowing with interest. You've handled yourself well tonight. But I've got one question left. Why didn't you tell them the full story from the beginning? The crowd went quiet again, curious, leaning in. Karen froze, sensing there was still something more she didn't know. And I knew the final truth, the one I'd held back all evening, was about to shatter whatever scraps of control she thought she had left. The officer's words hung in the air. Why didn't you tell them the full story from the beginning? The crowd leaned in, curiosity sparking again. Karen froze, her mouth open, her eyes darting nervously. She knew another blow was coming, but she didn't know from where. I crouched beside Max, resting my hand gently on his head. He looked up at me, calm and steady, his eyes shining in the glow of the streetlights. Because, I said slowly, my voice carrying across the cul-de-sac, I didn't think I should have to. The neighbors tilted their heads, waiting. Even the officer watched me intently. I didn't think I should have to explain that Max isn't just a service dog. He isn't just a retired K9. He's the reason I'm still standing here tonight. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen's face twisted with disbelief. What are you talking about? She demanded. I straightened, my voice stronger now. 2 years ago I was in an accident. My car was forced off the road during a late-night drive. I was trapped, bleeding, half-conscious. And Max, despite his injuries, despite being retired, was there. He pulled me from that wreck. He barked until help came. He saved my life. The crowd fell silent. The only sound was the faint hum of crickets and the low buzz of porch lights. I glanced down at Max, my throat tight. I owe him everything. Every single day since then has been a gift because of him. So when Karen calls him dangerous, when she mocks him in front of the community, she's not just insulting a dog. She's insulting the partner who saved me. And I won't stand for that. The silence shattered into murmurs of awe. Neighbors whispered to each other, their expressions softening, shifting from suspicion to admiration. Some even clapped quietly, the sound spreading until it rolled into scattered applause. The officer nodded slowly, his jaw firm. That explains it. That explains his discipline, his bond with you. And it explains why you weren't afraid of the lies tonight. Karen's face burned crimson. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words wouldn't come. Her power had evaporated. Her accusations were ashes now, crumbling under the weight of truth. Mrs. Jenkins stepped forward, her granddaughter tugging at her hand. I think I speak for all of us when I say, thank you. And thank Max. We judged too quickly. We listened to fear instead of facts. That won't happen again. The little girl broke free from her grandmother's hand and stepped closer, her voice small but clear. Can I pet him now? The neighbors chuckled softly. Karen sputtered, no, don't, but her voice was drowned out as Max gently lowered his head, allowing the child to scratch behind his ears. His tail thumped softly against the grass, calm and gentle. The neighbors smiled, their tension easing, the hostility dissolving into something warmer. Respect. Admiration. Even pride. Karen, shaking with rage, spun on her heel. This isn't over, she hissed, her voice trembling. You'll regret this. All of you will. But no one followed her. No one supported her. She stormed off into the night, her heels clattering against the pavement, her figure shrinking into the shadows until she disappeared around the corner. The board members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly embarrassed. Collins cleared his throat. Perhaps we should revisit how the HOA conducts itself. Clearly, some mistakes were made tonight. The neighbors laughed softly, shaking their heads. The officer closed his notepad, his tone final. There's nothing more to revisit. The matter is settled. This man and his service dog are protected, and if anyone tries otherwise, they'll answer to me. He gave me a short nod, his eyes lingering on Max with something that looked almost like admiration. Thank you. For your service. And his. I returned the nod. Thank you, officer. As the crowd began to disperse, neighbors stopped to offer quiet words of support. Mrs. Jenkins smiled warmly, squeezing my hand. He really is a hero, isn't he? I glanced down at Max, who sat tall and steady beside me, his eyes watching every movement, his ears twitching with the night sounds. Yeah, I said softly. He always has been. The cul-de-sac quieted as people returned to their homes, the glow of porch lights flickering on one by one. The officer climbed back into his cruiser, giving me a final nod before driving away. The night returned to stillness, but it wasn't the same stillness as before. It was lighter. Safer. I crouched beside Max again, scratching gently behind his ears. You did good tonight, buddy. Better than me if I'm honest. He pressed his head against my shoulder, and for a moment all the noise, all the shouting, all the accusations faded away. It was just me and him standing together like we always had, steady, unshaken, unbroken. I straightened, looking out over the quiet street. Funny thing about the truth, I said softly, more to myself than anyone else. You can try to bury it under noise, under fear, under lies. But it always comes back. Always. I turned toward my house, Max padding silently beside me. The night felt different now, not hostile but alive with the knowledge that justice had been served, that the truth had been heard. And as I closed the door behind us, one final thought lingered in my mind. Sometimes, people rush to judge without knowing the whole story. But when the truth finally comes out, it speaks louder than all the noise in the world. If you've ever had to stand up against unfair treatment, you know how hard it is to stay calm in the storm. What would you have done if you were in my shoes tonight? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories that remind us why the truth matters.